Hi, welcome to the first course on Swar Studio. In this session, I will try to start slowly by explaining some basic concepts that will be useful to beginners. If you already have the experience in this field, please bear with us. I will try to keep this explanation short. So first of all, what is the DAW? DAW stands for Digital Audio Workstation. We also often refer to it as a sequencer or even just a host. It is basically a software, generally a standalone app that lets us create music by combining a certain number of instrument or voice tracks. Basically, if you want to record a song, you'd create a track for each instrument or voice, and then you can record them, either all together at the same time or one after the other. You can then make any editing to your individual recording and then mix them harmoniously together by adjusting the level of each track so that the end result sounds good and clear. That is just the basic use of a DAW. We will see that there are many more possibilities than those described before. You will discover them over these sessions. There are probably hundreds of DAWs in the market today. Most common ones are Cubase, Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton Live, Fruity Loops, GarageBand, etc. etc. At Swar Systems, we also have our very own, of which we are very proud of. It's called Swar Studio. Despite being much younger, and let's face it, much less developed than some of these giants, we are convinced it has some very strong points. First of all, it includes lots of virtual instruments that you can use in your tracks without having to buy separate synthesizers or hire musicians. It's all in the box. Secondly, a good half of these instruments are from India, which makes Swar Studio an excellent choice for anyone willing to compose Indian music or simply wishing to add some spicy flavors to their compositions. Finally, its price is very attractive compared to other DAWs, which makes it a very good value for money. Okay, enough with self-promotions, let's get into real stuff. The first step is to install Swar Studio. Installation on Mac is pretty straightforward. You get a Studio 3 DMG volume. When you double-click it, you will see the setup. Then you run the setup using the standard options and you're good to go. Installation on Windows is a little more complicated because traditionally Windows was more business than audio-video oriented. This means there is some cases the default drivers don't do a very good job on the latency side. Latency is the gap between the moment you play a note and the time it's actually heard. Fortunately, there is a free low latency driver available that solves this problem. It's called SEO for All. Just head to seoforall.org and download the installer from there. Then follow the instructions to have that installed on your machines. Once that is done, you can proceed with the Swar Studio installation. Just run the Studio 3 XC setup, leave default options, and let it finish. Just one thing, we are assuming here that you are running Swar Studio 64 bits. If you are still on 32-bit system, you can run the previous setup that was 32 bits. Most of these courses will also work the same. Okay, now that Swar Studio is installed, you can run it. You will find the app in application on Mac and on the start menu on Windows. As you see, the first screen you are shown is for activating the app. You must enter here the product key you will have received from us. Best way is to copy paste from the email, then confirm, and it should be activated. And now we see the main Swar Studio windows. Okay, the first step that's required is to check your audio settings. We must make sure the right audio device and ports are selected before proceeding any further. So, go to the Swar Studio menu and select Tools and then Options. In the Audio Setting tab, check the values for input and output. On Mac, you can safely leave them as default input and default output for the moment. On Windows, however, check that you select the ACO options for both. This is done. You may also update the sample rate and I/O buffer size. Sample rate defines the number of samples you want for a second of sound. The larger the sample rate, the more your digitalized sound will resemble its analog or real-time sound. But note that human ear can hardly hear any differences past 48,000 Hz, so this is usually a good choice. I/O buffer, on the other hand, defines the size of the chunks of the sound the DAW will be processing. You can view a DAW as a farm outlet where empty incoming boxes are filled with apples. The size of the box is like the I/O buffer. Keeping a smaller size will result in less latency. But there is a risk the outlet won't be able to fill the box in such a short time. So there will be apples missing. In audio terms, that would translate into short range of silence that can be heard as click or static. Having a large I/O buffer will remove such clicks but will add more latency. A value of 512 samples is a good trade-off. If you still hear clicks, you may increase that. Alright, so now that we have defined this, we can click on OK and go back to the main screen. We should be ready to start our first song. A song is a main type of document managed by Swar Studio. You can open the existing one or create a new one through the options in the File menu or on the related icon of the toolbar. In this case, we are already in an empty song. But for the sake of it, we can click on the new song icon and we are presented with the empty song, ready to receive our track. There are three types of track in the DAW: audio, instrument, and aux. We will start with an audio track, and the two other types will be explained later on. In Swar Studio, an audio track holds sequenced chunks of audio data we refer as loops. Whether they are played once or multiple times doesn't make a difference. This data can either be recorded directly in the track or can be imported or dragged from an external audio file. To create an audio track, you can either click on the corresponding icon on the toolbar or select the option in the track, Add Track submenu. Just note, we have the option to create a mono or a stereo audio track. If we are recording with a stereo mic, we are importing stereo audio files. Then we should select a stereo track, otherwise a mono track is sufficient. In our case, we have a normal mono mic, so we are just creating a mono track. Now we see the track added to the song as a new row, with a header on the left and free space on the right. The track header is where we define all the parameters of the track. We can expand it to reveal additional controls by either clicking on the little arrows or by just dragging its bottom borders. The first step for recording audio in a track is to select a valid input device for it. This is done in the input drop-down that lists all available audio input devices. If you don't see your mic there, make sure it's connected and then go to the Tools, Options, Audio Settings screen and make sure it's both visible and selected in the Active Input Channels list. Once done, you should be able to choose it in the input drop-down of the track. Just note that I'm using here a virtual audio device setup. so you can see more than one channel available. I will just select channel 1, knowing I need my mic on the first port of the device. Once that is done, your track has been connected to your mic and is ready for the recording. The next step is now to arm the track for recording. Here you select which track you want to record into. Just note that you can record simultaneously in multiple tracks. For example, if you assign different input channels to 2 or 3 different tracks, then you would arm the 3 of them and each will be recording the input from its own channel. The arming is done by clicking on the red round icon here. Before we do that, one thing to consider is the audio feedback issue, also called as Larsen effect. If you leave your song output to your default speakers, the moment you arm a track for recording, you will start hearing a loud audio feedback. This is because the sound coming from your mic is amplified and played on your default speakers. And that sound is again picked up by your mic, amplified, played, and so on in a loop, resulting in a screeching sound. To avoid this, you can either use headphones so the mic doesn't pick up the sound output, or you can mute your output on the computer, or even mute the track itself. I will carry on after plugging my headphones there. Now you can safely arm our track for recording. We see the track being highlighted from the beginning, and we can hear some soft output from the mic. The real recording starts and stops when you press the play and then the stop button, or spacebar for convenience. Here we go. Swar Studio, a great digital audio workstation for Indian music. As we press the spacebar again, recording stopped, and the recording audio appears as a new audio loop. We can listen to what was recorded by pressing the rewind button and then play or spacebar. Swar Studio, a great digital audio workstation for Indian music. That's it. Now we would like to record another clip. Only thing is that we want to keep the first one but start recording after it. We do that by first clicking on the header bar at the position we want the recording to start, and then only arming the track for recording. We can see that a triangular cursor appears right there with the rest of the track highlighted. When we press play, recording will start from that point only, which now allows us to move the play cursor a bit before. So we have time to prepare. So I click here, I start playback. Even though I'm talking, nothing gets recorded until here. Now it's recording. Swar Studio, add spice to your compositions. Let's hear it. Recorded until here. Now it's recording. Swar Studio, add spice to your compositions. Yes, only that part was recorded. Right, so now that we have successfully recorded 2 clips, we are going to see how to do some basic audio editing. There are various actions that can be applied to audio clips. I'm going to show the most common ones, and the remaining will be discussed in a more advanced course. Let's start by removing any extra space in the clips. To do that, we must switch our cursors to range mode. By clicking on the range icons, this turns the cursor to a vertical lines, allowing it to drag a certain range of a track or a clip. Another important setting is the snap to drop down. This defines how the cursor should snap when positioned or dragged on tracks. A value of 1 always jumps from one measure to the next. A value of 1/4 jumps across quarters of a measure, and so on. If you don't want this snapping to take place, you can set this to free, and then you can select a range up to pixels precision. However, it is a good practice to keep some kind of snapping, if only to be able to align the clip over the track. So we will set our snapping value to 1/16. Now that this is done, we will click and drag the space before our clip, which becomes enlightened up to the point of the clip we can safely trim. Then we press the delete button on our keyboard, or we can also click over the selected area and select delete range, low, and behold, the selected range has been removed. Now what if we made a mistake and trimmed too much? That is not a problem, because throughout Swar Studio, undo is your friend. Most action in Swar Studio can be undone and redone. Click on the undo icon or press Command Z and you will go back one step in your update process. Click redo and you are back where you started. So remember, no worries, you can safely make edits to your songs knowing that you can always go back if you made mistakes. Isn't that awesome? Okay, now we will trim the end of our first clip the same way. Click and drag, then press delete key. And we will do the same on the second clip. We can also delete a range inside a clip. That is done the same way by dragging a range and pressing delete. Or if you want to just split a loop, you can click on an exact point where you want to split, then right click and select split loop. Let us do it here. Now that we have 3 trimming loops, we can move them around. To do that, we need to move back the pointer to loop mode by clicking on the pointer icon. The cursor turns back into an arrow. We can then click on a loop and drag it within the track. Let's rearrange our loops a bit. Since we cut one loop right at the middle, we have audio starting and ending sharply on one and the other part. If we leave it like this, we may get pops or clicks due to the quick changes in audio levels. To solve that, we can use fades in and fades out. In Swar Studio, this is very simple to do. You just go into range editing mode, then select the duration of the fade, then right click and then select fade in or out. You will then see a fade dialog where you can select the type and intensity of the fading curve. Just note that you can always change that afterwards. Pressing OK will add that fade curves to your loop. This way, the transitions between the loop and silence will be smooth. Now let's say this is the way we want our audio track to be. We don't really need to do anything else, but it would be cleaner to combine all these individual clips into a single loop. We can do that using the grouping options. Just switch to loop selection mode, then click on the first clip. Press Shift and press on the last one. This will select all clips in between. Now right click on any of those and select Group Loops. As you can see, this will bind all the loops together so they can easily be moved around or delete as single one. Another interesting option for audio loop is the possibility to adjust the volume levels throughout the clip. Of course, You could use the gain control, but this will affect not only the whole loop but also the whole track. To make in-loop adjustment, we can use the gain curve options. If you toggle the gain curve icon on the track header, you will see the default curve appears. In this case, it's a straight horizontal line right at the middle, so the audio clip is not altered in its volume at all. We can, however, change that by dragging the line up or down, and we see the audio signal adjust accordingly. More interestingly, we can change the level of just a single range by entering Range Edit mode, select the range, and then dragging the line up or down. As you see, only that selection is altered. But we can be more precise than that. After all, this is called a gain curve. So it's normal, we can set it to a curve shape. This is done by entering Loop Points mode by clicking on this icon here, and then dragging the existing points or clicking on empty areas to create new ones. This allows us full flexibility to draw the exact volume curve we need. Now, after intensive editing, you may have lots of small audio loops part, and the result may be a little bit messy, even after grouping them. So at that point, you can conveniently consolidate all these individual chunks of audio into a single loop. This is done by selecting the loops you want to include, or simply a range, and then pressing right click and selecting Bounce Selection in place. As you see, this will create a single loop that will be much easier to manage or even edit further. It's always a good policy to give a sensible name to loops so that we get an idea as to what they stand for. In this case, we select our loop, right click, rename loop. Here we name it promo call. Though of course, in your great composition, you can name the piece like intro, first stanza, chorus, filler, etc. etc. You should also give a proper name to your audio track. By double-clicking on the track name, I call this one lead voice. Now I want to show you some mixing, so I will need at least an extra track for that. Let me add a new mono audio track. Name it as second voice. And just record something, say Digital Audio Workstation. Okay, that's enough. I will just trim the beginning and ending. Then we are ready for mixing. This is best done in the mix view. You can open it through the view, mix view, menu option. In the mix view, you see the track as columns, each with all its controls. You can see here my two tracks displayed that way. This makes mixing much easier for compositions with many tracks. On a very gross level, you will adjust the gain and pan of each track versus the other. To achieve something that sounds good to your ear, mixing is very much a question of taste. So there is no absolute rules about it. In this case, we will just pan our track a little so they sound from sources separated in space. I do that by moving the pan control of this track to the left and of this one to the right. I can play it to click how it sounds. The last step is obviously to save and export. To save, just press Ctrl and S. If you haven't yet given a name to your song, you will be prompted to do so. You enter a proper name and then press OK. Another step to consider is to provide some more information for your songs. This is done in File, Song Info. Here you can enter any information you can provide about your songs, the author, etc. Don't forget to save again once it's done. Alright, now that our song is saved, we want it to share it with our friends. Unless they all have Swar Studio, it will be more convenient to save it as a standard audio file. This process is called bouncing. You can do it by going in File menu, then selecting Export As and then Audio File. You can provide a name for the resulting audio file and press OK. This will start the bouncing process. When it finishes, your song is available as a WAV or AIFF file. This is cool, but not convenient, because in most cases your audio file will be very big and heavy to upload and download. Fortunately, you can also export as MP3, but if you are on Windows, you will need a little setup beforehand. This is because the MP3 technology ownership is complicated and not clearly public domain. So we can't bundle the MP3 encoder along with our software. It is present by default on Mac systems but not on Windows. But you can get a free one by yourself by downloading LAME, which ironically stands for Lame Ain't an MP3 encoder. Just search for LAME encoder for Windows or go to the link below. Search for your LAME binary. Once selected and saved, you should be able to export as MP3. So back to our main screen, we select File, Export and then MP3. We need to give a name to our MP3 and then the exporting process starts. When finished, your MP3 file will be ready to share with your friends. Okay, so this brings us to the conclusion of this first course. In short, we have learned how to install Swar Studio, configure audio setting, create audio tracks, record audio clips, edit audio clips, mix tracks, export as audio files. This should allow us to get started with an audio-only compositions. But we are yet to discover a whole new dimension with MIDI tracks. This will be covered along with much more functionality in our next session. Do not miss it. Take care. Cheers.